Hey everybody, today is the day that we are recording a lot of descriptions for new beers that we have coming out, and I am very excited that this is the second lager in a row that I get to talk about today. So, Kastanie is the German word for chestnut. The Kastanie that we have made here at Old Nation is a Maibock, and we made it in collaboration with Urban Chestnut out of St. Louis, Missouri. For those of you who don't know Urban Chestnut, they don't distribute here in Michigan yet, but a great traditional brewery in terms of making really true to style and some outside the box, but a lot of true to style continental beers, and particularly German beers. Brewmaster Florian is a German trained brewmaster, like myself, I suppose, but he is from Germany. And the whole team over there is doing great work. Our brewers, Nate and Joe, went on down to St. Louis about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, brewed a great version of this beer at Urban Chestnut, came back and we put our own spin on it and brewed our own really traditional Maibock. So Maibock's made for the May Day celebration initially. This is pre-communism, so this was just kind of a spring celebration, May Day. And this is kind of late 18th century. There were bocks before then, but malting technology hadn't developed at that time, before that time, to the extent that you could make sort of a pale version of a stronger light lager, or stronger lager. Let me back up a little bit. Before the late 1800s, malt production, that is the way that malt was made and kilned, which means, sort of dried out and roasted, was a little bit haphazard, right? A lot of times it was done with wood. So the malt would come out smoky. Because temperature was difficult to control, color of the malt was difficult to control, which means color of the final beer was generally brown or brownish or amber or very dark brown or black. Quite often not black, but at least dark brown. What this means is that there were a lot of flavors going on in these Bock beers. It's probably best represented, although not really very accurately, in current Doppelbocks. So a much darker, deeper, deeply sweet beer at 7 to 8% alcohol, sometimes a little bit more, is where those beers were, with the development of better malting technology that didn't involve smoke quite often. Pale malt was possible. Particularly the brewers in Maibock in Germany were making really good stable beer out of this newer kind of malt that they were sort of perfecting before everyone else and shipping it everywhere, to the Mediterranean, to Scandinavia, through the Hanseatic Trading League, trading routes largely in Central Europe and what is now Germany. So in any event, new technology makes a lighter version of the strong beer they were making before that's a lot more palatable. But again, this isn't that long ago. It's like 150 years ago that this is happening or so. But since then, Maibock has become a really traditional beer for the spring celebration. There's legends about how, breweries would have malt left over at the end of the brewing season, and they would kind of cram their last few brews full of this malt, making much stronger, bigger beer. That might be true. But again, the spring celebration was huge in Europe. I mean, imagine pre-technology, right? You're coming out of this cold, hungry time with a big, solid, filling beer. And that's a great celebration for the summer. When you make it a lighter beer that's a lot more palatable, that's even better. And so, we see in the late 1800s or so, this style rise to prominence with Maibock Brewery, of course. Spaten makes a pretty good example that's very old. Hofbräu in Munich, to the extent that it's similar now, still makes a Maibock that they've made for a very long time. Lots of different breweries making Maibocks. Super celebratory beer, strong, drinkable, a little bit sweet, but just a killer kind of beer experience. So really great. A little bit off the beaten path lager, although one, at least the name of, people are pretty familiar with. Great history. Please Google Hanseatic Trading League as it's relative to beer. It's a really interesting story. And just Bock beers generally, the way that name developed out of Maibock, Einpökisch, and some dialect, and that kind of developed into Bock, which is also the German word for goat. So quite often you'll see goats on these labels. and that's why. Anyway, lots to talk about. Probably better to Google than listen to me blather on about it. Hopefully you love this beer. Lots of thanks to our friends at Urban Chestnut. We really enjoy it, and we hope that you pick some up at the pub, which is probably where you'll find it largely here in Michigan, although there may be a few cases scattered out throughout Michigan. Thanks again.